Story 1. Cheat on me with your ex, it'll ruin your life. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young that they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking, a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but she was never a good liar. So, I started tracking the mileage on her car. And sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then, one day, I sat down at the computer, and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I couldn't resist. I logged in to read her emails and saw a few exchanges between her and her college BFF. They discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. No mention of details about him, other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop. He suggested I contact a guy he knew, a former officer who had become a private investigator. Ron was great. I paid his retainer, gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report, with photos, times, dates, and locations, detailed how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. After that, they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours. Then, she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked up my and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob. He was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, because I had one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day my wife was served with the divorce papers at work, I had Ron meet with Bob's wife and show her everything he'd found. She seemed nice, and I figured she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what Bob had done, he was fired. And since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly, lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and broke Bob's nose. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail, time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state. His ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and eventually took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids. Now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she's my kids' mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. Story 2. My 36th husband, 41, got fired for harassing a coworker and won't talk to me about it. Original post, Ask Reddit, April 2nd, 2018. My husband Charlie and I have been together for 10 years, married for 6. We've had our ups and downs but are currently in an up. He has never done anything like this in the past, so it came out of left field for me, and I'm very much shocked and at a loss here. Charlie is a computer programmer and was a senior engineer at his former company, where he had worked for 4 years. He'd never had any trouble with coworkers, and were both friendly with a few of them, mostly other men and their wives. On Friday of last week, he came home around 11 a.m. and told me he'd been fired. He was really upset and agitated, and I didn't want to push him about it. But he told me that they said he was harassing a coworker and was fired. The information I've been able to get out of him. The coworker is Beth, a junior engineer he's never mentioned to me before. He said she's terrible at her job. Beth slept with a senior engineer we are both friendly with, Darren. Darren wasn't involved in the harassment, wasn't fired, etc. The company's lawyers were there, and among the things they told him was that Beth could have pressed charges but chose not to. Something happened with her car, but he won't say what. His exact words were, "There was something with her car." He was escorted off the premises and is not allowed back in the building to get his belongings. Instead, he has to arrange with security to pick them up after business hours. As far as anything else goes, he won't give me any details. He isn't interested in seeing a lawyer because he says everything is legal. He has basically admitted to sending Beth some emails, but won't say what they said or anything like that. I don't know if Beth sleeping with Darren had anything to do with it, but the fact that he gave me that detail makes me think it does. I'm not sure how it relates. Darren is a very nice single man who is in his late 20s and approximately the same age as Beth. My mind is running wild here. Charlie has been depressed and withdrawn all weekend, won't talk to me about it, and won't talk much in general. I work remotely, so I was home all day with him. He played video games all day and then went to bed at 6 p.m. The fact that he won't tell me anything and isn't interested in seeing a lawyer makes me think that it's bad, and makes me worry that everything is true, and not just a misunderstanding or a small thing blown out of proportion. He has never been flirtatious with other women or cruel to them, and he's never said anything bad about other women engineers he works with. I don't know what to do here. My instinct is to be supportive of my husband, but I don't know what kind of behavior I'd be supporting. I don't want to run to his coworkers we know and ask them, since they're more our friends than my friends. And while we spend time together at get-togethers or bars, I'm not close with them. In an immediate sense, I don't know what to do about helping someone who is so depressed and won't talk to me. TLDR. My husband was fired for harassing a coworker and refuses to give me any details or talk at all since Friday. Top comments, clever account name, 13i. Would tell him you have to assume the worst if he won't be honest with you. I've got to say he must have done bad shit to be escorted off the premises with no warning like that. Either he was hating on her and went over the top, or he tried to fuck her and went over the top, or he tried to fuck her and then hated on her. Edit. Reread. I'm guessing tried to fuck her, sent crazy emails and vandalized her car. He could easily still be charged criminally and or sued. 1000. I've worked at larger companies, and when they fire people, sometimes they are walked right out of the building. The reasoning is they don't want the fired person to make a scene and rock the boat. It's heartless, in my opinion, but it does happen. Something tells me OP's husband did something terrible, because lawyers were there, and apparently, the girl could have pressed charges. That is very unusual. My guess is OP's husband got jealous that Darren was sleeping with Beth and not him. He had a crush on Beth for a while and flipped out, went full nice guy on her. He mentioned emails, so there is evidence in writing as well. This does not bode well for OP. Mind Joe business. Seeing as it got so far that he's been fired and he doesn't want to fight it, sounds like the allegations are probably true. The fact that he brings up Darren makes it seem like he harassed her as a result of sexual jealousy. Does he usually shut down conversations on things? Does he usually keep things from you? I'd be very cautious about what he's hiding and what it means for you and your relationship. Even if it's not sexual and it's just plain old harassment. Do you want to be with a grown man who harasses young women to the point that he gets fired? Update. April 3rd, 2018. Next day. My thread was locked before I could respond to any comments, but I was able to read them this morning. I got up at 5:30 a.m. to go to the gym before work, and my husband was still awake playing video games. I presented him with the very good idea someone suggested, sending me an email with the details, but told him it wasn't acceptable to shut me out of this situation since it affects me too. His response was basically, "The paperwork is in my car. Go get it if you want to read it." I asked him to go get it so we could look at it together, and he said, "You're going to believe what you want anyway." All of this is unusual for our marriage because I'm a pretty patient person, I think. We went out to the car together. He got in, handed me the papers, and left. For about 2 hours, I was panicked because I didn't know where he went, if he was okay, or if he was thinking of hurting himself. His mother texted me at 9 a.m. saying he was at her house, asking me what happened and if everything was okay. His parents live about 15 minutes away, And I guess he told her he's going to be staying there. So, the paperwork. According to the paperwork, he sent Beth multiple harassing emails from anonymous accounts. The emails were printed and attached. Did this while at work, and his user account had been monitored for 3 months. The emails weren't sexual or romantic, just about how she sucked at her job, wouldn't be there if she wasn't a woman, should quit before she got fired, and how everyone in the office hated her, made fake user accounts for his company's product that she worked on, and submitted bad reviews of her work. Sent an anonymous email to her boss saying she was sleeping with a senior engineer. Put a gun catalog on the windshield of her car. The subscription card inside had his name and address. Allegedly harassed her on Twitter for 3 months, but they could only confirm one account was his. This is all terrifying to me, and I feel so bad for this woman. I have no idea what this is. About Charlie is at his parents' house right now, and I don't know what my next move is. TLDR, my husband definitely harassed his coworker for 3 months.